Alright, so today I'm going to show you how to do the H2O to go with the front slip pocket, zipper pocket, and a square box bottom, plus the drawstring. So the first thing you want to do is I took my original pattern piece and printed out two, taped them together, and then from the center measured out so that I can get my two pieces. So you measure out 2 1/4 from the center so that you get your center pieces, and then so like this becomes the pattern piece, and I'll show you that. So here's my center. You want a piece that ends up being 5.5 inches. And then from one of the sides, you want to measure in 5 1/4, and that's going to give you the side pieces. So you have both a left and a right. So I just cut one piece and then I mirror it for left or right piece. So when you're all done, you have a piece that is your center and then your left and right mirror. So it can be like this. All right, so you need those. And then you're gonna need pieces for the pocket. So the first pocket piece is the front and bottom and the front top. So the front bottom is 5.5 by 7.5. Front top is 2 by 5.5. So that's front, top, and bottom. Pocket lining piece is 5.5 by 9. You have your back slip pocket piece is 5.5 by 9.5. And then your box bottom is 4.5 by 3.5. And you'll need two, an exterior and a lining. And then for the cinch top, you want to cut a piece that is 6 inches by 16 inches, and that'll end up being folded over so that you can make your cinch top. And then I cut my zipper typically about, this one's a little over 7 inches. You don't need that long, but I like to not have to go around my zipper, so I make it longer. And then for your lining, you want to take the original main body liner piece, but add 1/4 inch to the bottom. And then we'll end up slicing this so that we can add in the cinch top. All right, so that's all your pieces. So first we're going to start on the front pocket. All right, so to do the front zipper slip pocket piece, you're going to need your zipper, your pocket lining piece, your back slip pocket piece, and your front and top bottom. All right, so first thing we're going to do, we can put these aside, is take our bottom slip pocket, or yeah, front bottom piece, and I always use tape. You don't have to use tape. You can use just clips or whatever you like to hold your zipper. So you want to take, with your zipper pulled to the left, you're going to place it face down. And again, this is where, for me, I like to have a little more zipper so that I can move that out of the way. So we have that. Then you're going to need, and you want to sandwich that with your pocket lining piece. Now these are very similar. Pocket lining piece and the back slip pocket piece are really close. One is 9 inches and the other one is 9.5. So make sure you have the right one. You want the pocket lining piece, and you're going to sandwich then the zipper in between those two pieces. Okay, so you're just gonna line that up. Okay, and then we're gonna sew that. And my machine, I'm not changing out my foot, so sew it this way, but we can, so you're only really going to be able to get as close as your foot can get. If you want to change to a zipper foot, you can. That'll give you 3/8 of an inch seam allowance versus 1/4 of an inch. Okay. All right, so then you're going to take and you're going to flip your front pocket piece and your back pocket piece. You can either finger press these or press them with an iron. I'm just going to finger press mine. I'm using waterproof canvas. So just finger pressing should be okay. Okay, and then once they're pressed out, top stitch. Make sure that stays nice and taut. Okay. Okay. All right, and then now you're going to flip this over and take your pocket lining piece and you're going to fold it to meet the top of your zipper. So again, I use tape. You can use whatever you want. So I'm going to take and I'm going to fold this pocket lining piece up so that it's right sides together and line that up at the top of my zipper. And then I like to fold it or turn it over and then just add on my top. So you want to find your front top and we're going to put that on this way. And at this point we can just clip it to hold it in place.
We're going to go get some ice for our cooler. Honey, you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Josh, you want to come get your markers?
What?
Use your markers, Johnson? You want to walk with markers and pen on, Johnson?
Okay. And then you just want to flip this up. And we're going to top stitch. Like that.
These are good. Look. I'm just gonna add highlights to what I already did.
Alright, so you're going to flip that up and you're going to top stitch. Okay. Alright, so now you have a piece that looks like this. The next thing we want to do is take the slip pocket, back of the slip pocket, and you're going to put it right sides together with the front now of your pocket piece. Okay, and line that up and sew that with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Then we're going to flip this over and I like to just kind of finger press both sides. Alright, and then kind of put a little clip there. Keep everything nice and straight. And I'm gonna top stitch across this top here, and then pull my zipper in. I'll go all the way around. You don't have to do this step, but it makes it easier so it all stays together. Just definitely make sure you pull your zipper in. You don't want to sew that off. Okay. All right, so now we have a piece that looks like this, which is your little pocket piece here. All right, and then we want to take our left and right sides. So, I'm sorry, first you want your center. Now, I always take and put this about 1 inch to 1.25 inches down from the top, because you have to make sure you stay out of your seam allowance, and you want room, obviously, to do your slip pocket. So I usually just take my little 1-inch roller here, kind of eyeball it a bit. Looks pretty good. I'm just gonna put a couple clips, keep it in place. Okay, so let's just baste around that. I based it from this side because what you can see here is I have about 1.25 inches that's going to get cut off. I don't know if this is due to the pattern piece or if the pocket was originally done for using like where you square your bottom instead of it being a box, like a cutout separate piece. But because we're doing the cutout box bottom, this will just get cut off. So I'm going to baste it from this side and then just cut off this extra here. Grab my good scissors and we're gonna cut off this extra at the bottom, and I'm just gonna cut off my extra zipper now too. Okay. My lighter here is fan on. There we go. Okay. All right, so now we want to take this and you want your left and your right pieces. Now, the left and the right pieces, you can tell because the small U-shape, half U-shape is actually going to be against this pocket piece on both sides, right? So you have 2 mirrored pieces. Here's your left and here's your right. So that's what that's going to look like. So we're just going to we're going to match up the bottoms. Okay. And what you can see is like this section is where you're going to end up sewing down at 1/4 inch, so it overlaps. And you can see there, when I flip that over, it makes a really nice U shape that'll end up matching up with your lining piece. So we're going to top stitch this. And then we want to repeat for the other side. That's your completed front. All right, I'm gonna take this and iron on a piece of fleece. I typically cut my fleece to be 8 inches by 15 inches, and that just kind of fits this section. It keeps it out of my seam allowances and out of any of the bulk. I don't want any of that bulk up in where the connectors are gonna go. So I'm gonna do that now, and we'll come back and finish the front. All right. Okay, so now that we have taken our piece, I put a piece of fleece batting on this. I do a piece that's 8 by 15, and I leave it out of all of my seam allowances. So now we're going to take this piece, we're going to fold it right sides together and match up the ends, and clip those. Okay, and we're going to sew that with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so now you want to find your centers. So just flatten this out. You could kind of match those up. Just clip your center here if you can. All right, and then match those and clip onto your sides. All right, so this is just going to help you find the centers on all 4. So then what I do next is you need your 4.5 by 3.5 piece, bottom piece, and we're going to put that on next. So now put that right sides together with the front pocket of your bag and clip that in place. And then we're going to sew that using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Only, you know, start like maybe an 1/8 of an inch in from either side. That's going to help you when you go to box the bottom. you're going to be right along the Peltex or Decaville Heavy, but not necessarily through it. So as long as you did that right, you should be right next to it. Okay. All right, and then pull the other side up and match the seam now with the center. And flatten out that seam. That's going to help it sit nicer in the bag. And then just clip. Okay. And then sew that side with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, now what you want to do, so you're going to have like these two pieces. In order to box the bottom, I find it easiest if you make a small snip in the body of your bag, right where your stitching stopped. Small, like not even a 1/4 inch, a scant 1/4 inch. Make a snip. Get out my good scissors. Just don't go through your stitching. Okay, so then what that does is that helps this be able to fold. So now I'm going to match up the center of my bottom with the center notch that I had clipped. And what you'll find is that this is going to kind of like fold over. So you're just really just pinching that so it stays closed. Okay, and then we're going to sew that with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so sew that with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I had to fix my thread. And it definitely gets thick here, so just take your time. Okay. These extras. All right, and then repeat for the other side. Because this is so thick right here, I'm going to use just some folded up vinyl just to help, like a hump jumper will definitely help you. So then just check inside and make sure you got everything. Looks pretty good. Okay. So then I just like to kind of trim these corners a bit. You got my good ones. Just don't go through your stitching, but trimming the corners definitely help with reducing the bulk and being able to push out those corners fully. All right, so now I'm going to leave this wrong side out for now because I like to actually put the lining inside the exterior and then turn the bag. So we'll move on to our lining next. Okay, for this next part, I'm going to show you how to do the lining with the cinch top. So essentially you're going to take your lining piece, you're going to measure down 1 1/4 inch, and then cut right across that. Okay, so this is going to be my top part, this is my bottom part. So we'll put that aside for just a second. And then I want to take my piece that I'm using for the cinch top, and you want to fold over the edges, the short edges, by 1/4 inch, and then fold them over again 1/4 inch. So that's going to encase that raw edge, and you want to do that for both sides. So I'm going to use just some tape to help me out here, and then a couple of clips. Okay, so I'm going to fold this down, and you can really just eyeball it, but it's 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to fold it again 1/4 inch, and again that's just encasing those raw edges. Let me take a couple clips. Okay, let's do that to the other side. Okay, fold that down 1/4 inch, and again fold it one more time 1/4 inch. Okay, so then we're just gonna sew down each of these sides. To the other side. Okay. So now this is going to be the side that you just sewed. It has like the folded under raw edge. It's going to be the inside part of your cinch top. So you're going to fold this in half, hot dog style. Okay, so, and I'm just going to, well, I guess first I'll do this. I'll put the cord in. I cut my cord to just be a couple inches longer on each side, only because, and I'm using like a paracord. The reason you do that and you wouldn't want it too long is because when you go to tie it, it's going to show. So I'm going to clip these so that those raw edges stay matched. Okay. All right, and then I'm going to make sure I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch from this folded side so that it encloses that cording, and then I'll go and I'll just base stitch this bottom part together as well. So 1/2 inch. Just make sure as you're sewing down here that you keep your cording out of the way. You don't want to sew that because that's not going to be helpful. just going to base the bottom closed so those edges stay closed.
Okay.
All right, so now that's the top, and you can see like we'll be able to pull that closed. All right, so now let's take the lining piece, and I'm gonna put this right side down. I mean, there really isn't a right or a wrong side, but maybe just pick, you know, you're gonna see this outside part really, so I'm just gonna lay it this way. Probably helpful if we find our center on this. And then I already have a center mark on my canvas here, so I'm just gonna match up those centers and then the edges. And then I'm going to take the top piece. I'm going to sew this all at once, and you're going to put that obviously right side down on top. So you're sandwiching those two pieces together. Okay, so then you're going to stitch this with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, then I'm going to take this whole thing and I'm going to flip it, and I want to push the seam down, and I'm going to top stitch underneath this seam. All right, so we're going to top stitch through this piece. All right. And again, that seam is going towards the bottom. That's because you want this to kind of like stand up in your bag. So now we're going to proceed with the lining the same way you would if you didn't have this in there. So you're going to fold this right sides together. And we're going to clip it together. Now you need to leave an opening in order to turn it. Some people like to sew it all the way shut and then seam rip out what you don't need. I just like to sew down a little bit and then actually go off my edge and then come back in and then sew down again. So I'll show you what I mean by that. I find this easiest, and it kind of holds the stitches really well when you go to turn it out. All right, so 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to stitch like a little bit past where this seam is now, because I think that'll be best. And then I just turn it like this and I stitch off and back stitch. And then I'll leave a gap way to there. And I'm going to sew in a little bit. And then sew down and off. Oh, something happened to my bottom. Got stuck. Try that again. Make sure these are lined up. Alright, so we're going to sew in about 1/4 of an inch and then sew down. Okay. Alright, so that leaves a nice big gap for turning it. So you can see here I got this gap. Alright, so now clip your centers of your bottom part here the same way we did. So I hold it flat, then what I do is I match up the notch I just made to the center seam like that, and then I'm just gonna go out each side and clip what the center would be. So there's the center here. Okay. And you have to do really tiny clips because your seam allowance is only 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing we did with the exterior. I'm going to find a small snip for my centers on all 4 sides of the bottom. So then we're going to match this up with the front. So the 4.5 inch long piece matching up with the front. Right, and we're going to clip that and sew it with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Again, you're going to take that bottom piece, match up the snip there with the center, and I like to fold, butterfly my seam, and then clip that center, and then clip the 2 sides. And again, so 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Alright, so again, you're gonna take and in all 4 places here, you're gonna make a small snip right underneath where the bottom stops and your stitching is. Just don't snip through your stitching. That would not be a happy thing. That one. Okay. So then we're going to do the same thing we did with the top, where we push these together. Now what you'll notice is, you can see like the difference, like here's the interior, exterior. It doesn't always match up, and that's okay. Like the bottom, it's going to fit in there pretty nicely. So just make sure your centers are close and trying to match, and then clip the rest, and then sew that with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and repeat for the other side. And I just like to trim down the seam. side. So match up that center notch, add a clip here, and one here. Okay, so that one, 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Trim off any excess. Okay. All right. So now, just cut this between. All right. So now we have a completed interior and our completed exterior. So I'm gonna do. Normally, I don't do the seams together. So like, here's the seam of the exterior and then the seam of the interior. I usually do them opposite. However, I think for your drawstring it would be better to have it off the back of the bag. So I'm going to turn my interior right side out. And then I'm going to put this, lining up the seams. And real quick, I'm going to just flip. I don't want to get this caught when I go to sew the two together. So I'm going to flip this part down out of the way so that it doesn't. Okay. And then I think the only other thing I want to do is snip, small snip at the center mark I made. So I know what the centers are there. And then let's do the same here. So I'm just going to kind of match these up. Make sure I have the center. Okay. All right. So I'm going to take right sides together, snap the interior inside the exterior, keeping the flap out of the way. And this definitely takes some finagling, like it's not the easiest. All right. Okay, so now I have those together and I'm gonna add in my D-ring hooks. So let me get those. Okay, so the next thing we need to do, I should have done this before putting the lining in, but I'm not a filmmaker, so this is the best you're getting out of me. I use triangle rings and I'm going to use this brown seatbelt webbing, and we're going to attach that to the exterior so that when we sew the exterior and interior together, they are together. So I'm just going to make a couple stitches to hold that together. And you can use whatever you want. I mean, you could just, you know, sew in seatbelt webbing. You would just need a rectangle ring for that. So you would do like a rectangle ring, and then to make it adjustable, just use the adjustable, like an adjustable slider. Otherwise, I just like making this, and then I'll use swivel hooks to attach mine. Okay, so we have my 2 rectangle rings. I usually put them about 1/4 to maybe 1/2 inch above where they're gonna be, and then that way there's plenty of overhang. I'm just attaching this to the exterior piece. So I'm folding the lining piece back. I'm sure it's hard to see because it's black on black. Just folding the exterior piece or the interior piece back and attaching it to the exterior. Okay. Okay. All right, so now we're gonna connect this all together. So I match up the side, the exterior and interior at the tops here, and I'll do that on both sides. Okay. All right. All right, and then I go around and just match. So like I'll match the centers. And again, normally these seams are opposite of each other, the interior and exterior seam, but because I'm doing it like this, that they have to be against each other. Pull these down. And then I just kind of like pull the fabric, oops, and match it up. Throwing things on the floor. All right, and then I'll do match up the centers on the other side. So here's the center snip. Clip that. We're gonna hold that in place. Okay. All right, now you can sew this either from the interior or the exterior. I find it easiest to sew it from the interior. I kind of just tuck this in as I'm going, and then I will bring it out. And I usually start at one of the ends with the triangle rings. And you're gonna sew, I sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Just sew that all the way around. And just maneuver as you go. It's not the easiest, it's, you know, a tighter space and all of that. So just take your time around the curves. I would say that obviously the curves are the hardest part. To do a second line of stitching above my first line on my connector. All right, so now I usually just take, and in order to get like really nice corners, I just trim these corners down as much as you can. Obviously don't go through your stitching. It's gonna give you a nice crisp corner there. All right, and then lastly, I'll take my pinking shears and I'm gonna cut these curves, and that's gonna help those curves sit in there nicely. So you can see I cut all those out. All right, so now it's time to turn it. So just pull out your lining. This is always the hardest part, depending on your materials too. Try and finagle it as much as I can. Okay. All right. Pop it out the opening that you left in your lining. Testing out your stitching. All right, so now I'm gonna take, I just want to make sure you pop out all these corners real nice. Try and get in there and pop those out. Okay. All right, so there's your box bottom. So you can see you have your nice box bottom. There we go. Okay, and then I want to close up my lining. So I'm going to take and clip closed my lining opening. So just add a couple of clips to it. Okay. So now I'm going to sew this closed. I try and get as close as I can. So that the seam is not very big. And you do want to make sure you stitch it all the way up though, you don't want a hole. Okay. That's pretty good. Alright, so then I'm going to take and stick the lining inside. I just forgot I gotta pop these out. Should have done that before closing the bag. Alright, so you're going to pop the lining in. Okay, get it down in there. Okay. And then roll those seams so you get them nice and crisp. Okay. Okay, looks pretty good. All right, and then I just like to add a couple clips that keeps the seam from rolling on itself. Stuff the cinch top in there, and normally I do top stitching from the exterior, but with the top it may be kind of hard to do, but we'll try it. All right, so I usually just pick one of these sides to start at, and I'm going to top stitch all the way around. And this definitely takes some finagling, right? So I need to make sure I'm keeping the other part out of the way. You want to keep the cinch top out of the way. So there's a lot to make sure for this tiny little area that you're keeping out of the way. But if you go slow, you'll get it. Oh boy, shooting clips. Okay. Alright, here's where the cinch top is. So you just want to make sure that you don't get that caught. So just go underneath, kind of tuck that out of the way. Now, if I was using a contrasting thread, I probably would have done this from the other side, but this doesn't, it's not looking too bad, so we're good. Okay. Check your stitching. Okay. Looks good. All right. So now I'm just trim my threads here. Okay, so now I have my H2O to go with the cinch top. So I can add, probably just add, knot it at the end. So make sure you light your ends here. Let me pull. Oh, this fan being on is not helping. Okay. Alright, so I'll probably just knot these together. Okay. Alright. So then you can just cinch the top. There you go. You got your front pocket, your zipper pocket. Alright. And then just finish the bag. Alrighty. There you go, guys. Square bottom, slip pocket, zipper pocket, cinch top.